The live stream was supposed to be a celebration. Mintra's followers, nearly 1.2 million of them, had waited weeks for this moment. A raw, unfiltered journey to perfect beauty, as she'd called it. Bangkok's biggest beauty vlogger, famous for her flawless skin and candid charm, was finally addressing her only flaw, her slightly crooked bottom teeth. The camera angle was tight, clinical. Bright white lights bathed the room, creating a halo effect around the dentist's gloved hands. "White Nirvana Dental," she whispered into the mic. "Imported Japanese tech, spiritually bonded ceramic. 3 new teeth, 1 perfect smile." Hearts floated across the screen. Fans flooded the chat with love. She smiled wide, leaned back in the chair, and the surgery began. It was smooth, almost too smooth. The dentist didn't speak much. He hummed something low and steady, like a chant. Mintra winced once, then she went quiet. 23 minutes in, something odd happened. The camera glitched. Just a flicker. But when the screen stabilized, the dentist was holding a 4th tooth. The comments slowed. Was that a mistake? The procedure was supposed to be 3 ceramic implants, no more, no less. Mintra herself had said so. The brand's website confirmed it. But the 4th tooth, it didn't look like ceramic at all. Not smooth or pearly. It had a dull, porous texture, almost like bone. The dentist pressed it into her lower gum. Mintra's body twitched, but he held her jaw steady. His mouth moved, barely audible, speaking something not Thai, not Japanese, something older. At minute 27, the camera cut to static, and Mintra never posted again. No goodbye, no follow-up photos, no sponsored brand reveal. Her channel went silent, and 5 days later, when her fans rewatched the video frame by frame, they noticed something worse than the 4th tooth. Her smile moved. Not the muscles around it, not her lips, just the teeth. After the surgery ended, as her body lay still, the 4th tooth twitched, then clicked into place with a tiny, hungry snap, like it had found a home. It started with a Reddit thread. Posted under the Unexplained Asia subreddit, the title read, "Did anyone else notice the extra tooth in Mintra's surgery stream?" The post didn't get much traction at first, just a few upvotes, a handful of curious comments. But the next night, at exactly 12:44 a.m., the original poster dropped a slowed-down frame-by-frame video, and that's when the spiral began. Hundreds of people stayed up, rewatching the live stream, some out of curiosity, others out of obsession. They dissected every second, every pixel, every flicker of light, and what they found wasn't just the 4th tooth. It was something much worse. Around minute 24, just after the dentist inserted the supposed final implant, the camera trembled again. A soft hum could be heard in the background, not from the dentist, but deeper, layered beneath the audio. A chewing sound, wet, rhythmic. Not from the patient, not from anyone in the room. It sounded like it came from inside the microphone. One viewer slowed the audio and boosted the waveform. The chewing looped in a pattern, like a pulse. Gnock, gnock, gnock. Another user, a dental student, posted something chilling. The 4th implant doesn't follow the gum line. It shifts against the tissue. It's not placed, it's burrowing. Then came the screen captures. In the final minute before the stream cuts to black, Mintra's eyes are closed. She looks sedated, peaceful. But someone circled her mouth. Frame 1683. There, the fourth tooth moves. Not a twitch, not a flinch, a deliberate, calculated grind, like it's testing its surroundings. And then, something even worse. Frame 1687. A grin. Her lips don't move, her face is slack, but the teeth pull upward just slightly, revealing more gum than before. She's smiling. Not her. The teeth are smiling. By the following morning, the thread had over 20,000 upvotes. The words "fourth tooth" began trending across TikTok and Twitter in Thailand, then Japan, then the Philippines. Hundreds of reaction videos went live, some fake, some terrifyingly real. One girl tried to recreate the possessed smile in her mirror, only to post an hour later in a panic, saying her gums had started bleeding and her reflection smiled back too long. A boy in Chiang Mai claimed to hear chewing sounds through his earbuds, even when no video played. A wellness TikToker said she woke up with cracked molars and blood beneath her fingernails after falling asleep while watching Mintra's stream on loop. It was becoming more than just a mystery. It was becoming a curse. The clinic, White Nirvana Dental, deactivated its Instagram page. Its website redirected to an empty page with a single line of text. "You cannot unsmile the truth." And somewhere in a cramped apartment in Bangkok, a freelance journalist named Sudha Kanchanaburi stared at her cracked laptop screen, mouth dry, heart racing. She had seen a lot in her work, but she had never seen teeth move on their own. Not until now. And she knew one thing for certain. She needed to find that clinic before the fourth tooth found someone else. The clinic was spotless. Too spotless. White Nirvana Dental stood at the corner of a narrow Bangkok soi, wedged between a cat cafe and a luxury nail spa. Its glass facade gleamed under the tropical sun, almost painfully bright, as if daring anyone to find fault with it. But Sudha wasn't here to admire aesthetics. She adjusted her sunglasses, flipped open her worn leather notebook, and stepped inside. The air was unnaturally cold. A receptionist with skin like porcelain and an unreadable smile greeted her. Her name tag simply read Mint. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked, voice smooth as static. "No, I'm writing a feature for Urban Beauty magazine. Your clinic has gone viral. I wanted to interview the owner." The receptionist blinked once, then again. "No owner, only clients, only smiles." Sudha hesitated. "Then maybe the head dentist? Dr. Atisak is unavailable. Can I have his full name?" Another long blink. "No surname." That was the first red flag. No Thai professional, especially one in healthcare, worked under a single name. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was suspicious. Sudha wandered to the waiting area. Everything was white. The chairs, the walls, even the orchids in the corner. Not a hint of dust, no magazines, no scent of disinfectant, just a sterile emptiness, like a showroom that had never truly operated. She glanced at the counter. A plaque read, "Imported Japanese ceramic implants, spiritually bonded, lifetime guarantee." But no certificates, no ministry approval stamps, no photos of staff, no before and after pictures, just smiles. Smiles on the wall, smiles in frames, smiles that all looked too similar, too wide, too many teeth. Later that evening, back at her apartment, Sudha dug through the clinic's business registration. Nothing. No tax records, no government health certification. She ran a reverse image search on the clinic's promotional photos. Result? Stock images, Japanese models. One of them even appeared in an ad for dish soap in 2019. She called the Department of Medical Services. The operator was helpful until she mentioned the name. White Nirvana Dental? The man repeated. No such clinic in our registry. Are you sure? They're performing live surgeries. No license, no application, no inspection history. Suda's voice dropped. What about Dr. Atisak? A pause. Then, that name is familiar. She leaned closer to the speaker. There was a Dr. Atisak, a prosthodontist, but he died 7 years ago. Fire at Wat Nakhon Temple. He was caught inside. Suda's blood ran cold. A dentist burned alive at a temple. She checked the location of that temple. Same street, same land, different name now. The White Nirvana Dental Clinic had been built exactly where Wat Nakhon once stood, the temple consumed by fire during a ritual gone wrong. A ritual involving bone relics. Suda stared at the glowing screen, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. She clicked back to the original live stream, paused it on minute 27, zoomed in. Dr. Atisak's eyes met hers through the screen, and for just a fraction of a second, he smiled. A smile that didn't end at the mouth. A smile that lived in the teeth. The back alley smelled like stale soy oil and dead incense. Suda stood behind White Nirvana Dental, facing a rusted metal gate that led into the waist area. She wore a surgical mask, not for COVID, but for what she was about to do. The dumpster was padlocked, but the fence wasn't. She climbed over, heart thudding, camera strapped to her chest. She needed proof. If this clinic was real, if it was performing unlicensed procedures, using human remains, hiding deaths, she couldn't just write about it. She had to show it. And then she saw it, a cracked box labeled in faded red marker, sharps and ceramic waste. Gloves shaking, Suda peeled back the lid. Inside were dozens of blood-stained gauze pads, bits of dental wire, and small white objects. Teeth. Not just crowns, whole implants. At least 30 of them. Some were pristine, polished, ivory-colored, smooth like porcelain. But others weren't. She picked one up with tweezers. It was rough, porous, grayish in color, lighter than enamel. Not ceramic. It looked like bone. Old bone. Human bone. Suddenly, a whisper cut through the alley, not from a person, but from inside her chest. A voice that didn't speak in language. It clenched. She dropped the tooth. Back in her apartment, Suda placed 3 of the implants on a sterile tray and contacted an old friend, Krit, a mortuary tech at Chulalongkorn Hospital. You want me to carbon test dental waste? He asked, laughing nervously. You know that's not legal, right? Tell them it's for a historical article. I'll owe you 10 favors. Krit sighed. Fine, but if it starts whispering at me, I'm mailing it back. He took one sample and promised results within 48 hours. Suda kept the other 2 under lock. But that night, she couldn't sleep. At exactly 3:11 a.m., her bathroom light flickered on by itself. She walked in, barefoot, and gasped. On the mirror, written in something red and smeared, were 3 Thai characters. Kraduk, bone. Her gums ached. She opened her mouth and gasped. One of her molars had cracked. She hadn't even noticed. But worse, something was pressing against the gum line behind it. Something hard. The next day, Krit called her, his voice tight. You need to come now, he said. I tested the sample. And? It's not just human bone. It's cremated monk bone. What does that mean? It means it came from a body burned in ritual conditions, sacred fire. Monks are cremated differently here. The bone crystallizes. Sudha's mouth dried. Crit continued, but that's not the part you should be worried about. She waited. He whispered, the DNA shows two distinct sources. Sudha blinked. What? There's a second genetic imprint embedded in the first, like the bone absorbed another body inside it. Like possession? Crit paused. No, he said slowly, like the bone was still conscious when it fused. Later that night, one of the implants she'd brought home vanished. She checked her drawer 3 times. All that remained was a faint white dusting on her pillow and 3 red scratch marks inside her mouth. She hadn't dreamed. Something had moved in the night. Something looking for a new place to belong. Pimshanak hadn't smiled in her sleep before. Her boyfriend, Nati, would have known. They'd lived together for nearly 2 years. He knew how she mumbled when dreaming, how she curled like a shrimp on cold nights, how her eyes twitched just before waking. But this was new. At first, he thought it was cute. He'd woken up around 2:30 a.m., reached for water, and glanced over, only to see her lying perfectly still, lips parted slightly in a dreamy grin. Her mouth looked content, too content, like something good had just happened to her, but only inside her own head. He took a photo, chuckling to himself, and went back to sleep. The next morning, Pimshanak woke up with blood on her chin. What happened? She asked groggily. You tell me, Nati said, showing her the picture. She stared, confused. I don't remember dreaming. They assumed it was a nosebleed or maybe a cracked gum. She brushed her teeth, ignoring the copper taste. But that night it happened again, and the night after. And this time, the smile was wider. Nati began staying up to watch. At 3:08 a.m., just like clockwork, Pimshanak's lips would twitch and stretch into a perfect crescent. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes fluttered beneath the lids. And then, she began to chew. Not dramatically, not like eating, just soft, steady grinding. Gnuk, gnuk, gnuk. Nati filmed it. In the recording, her jaw moved in a rhythmic pulse like a metronome. Her teeth clicked faintly. Her fingers twitched beside her face, nails curling toward her palms. Then she spoke, but the voice wasn't hers. Low, raspy, male. Finally, soft. Nati turned the lights on. Her smile stopped instantly. She woke up, confused and gagging. Blood dripped from her mouth. 4 of her nails were broken at the base, as if she'd been clawing something in her sleep. When she saw her own reflection in the mirror, Pimshanak screamed. One of her bottom molars was gone, but there was no wound, just smooth, closed gum where the tooth had once been. Next, she posted a story on her beauty Instagram, barely able to speak properly. Hey guys, update on my smile journey. I think I'm going to sue White Nirvana. I had the implant surgery last month, 3 teeth, but last night I think something took one back? She didn't go viral, not yet, because hours later her entire profile disappeared. All photos wiped, all reels removed. Her followers got a strange notification. @Pimshanak has permanently deactivated their account. But her friend Mint, the one who'd recommended the clinic, received a voicemail before it all vanished. A long, glitchy whisper that didn't sound like Pimshanak. Just one line, barely audible through static. Don't get it comfortable. Back in her apartment, Suda saw the headline flash on her newsfeed. Second influencer missing after white nirvana surgery. She stared at the pixelated photo of Pim Shanak's last story, zoomed in on the lower jaw, paused. Right between the first premolar and the canine, something white, something longer than the others, curved, like it was smiling on its own. Wat Bon Tat was nothing more than a crumbling skeleton of brick and silence. Once a small forest temple on the outskirts of Nakhon Pathom, it had been decommissioned years ago, overgrown, half swallowed by banyan roots. Locals avoided it, not out of disrespect, but out of caution. No one wanted to disturb what slept there. Suda arrived just before dusk. The temple grounds were eerily quiet. No dogs, no birds, just the hum of distant cicadas and the thick, breathless weight of air that pressed against her chest like something watching. She followed a tip from a university archivist, someone who had come across her article draft on bone ceramic implants. He'd read her mention of cremated monk bone and responded with a single sentence. If you want to understand what's inside that tooth, find Pratham. He left no number, no explanation, just a name and this place. She found him sitting beneath a Bodhi tree, cross-legged, blind in one eye, his robes the color of dried blood. He didn't ask her name. He only nodded and said, "You brought it with you." Suda stiffened. "You mean the implant?" He turned his head toward her slowly. "No," he said, "the breath." She didn't understand. He motioned for her to sit. Then, without touching her, without asking a question, he began to speak. "There was once a monk," he said, "who sought to trap suffering itself. Narung, he believed pain came from spirits, lost ones, clinging to mouths that wouldn't speak, to hearts that wouldn't forget. He thought if he could anchor them into objects, they could be controlled, pacified." He looked up, his clouded eye glassy with age. "So he created the Puklom Sin, spirit-binding ceramics. He ground ash from dead monks into clay, pressed it with sacred oils, fired it in temple kilns, and chanted their names, not once, but 1,000 times. He held up one trembling finger. But the spirits do not like being caged. They smile to pretend." Suda's voice cracked. "What happens when you put that thing into a living person?" The monk grew quiet, then said, "It does not stay as clay. It awakens as bone." She took out the implant from her bag, the last one she had, and placed it on a banana leaf between them. Pratham didn't touch it. He simply breathed out once. The tooth vibrated. Suda gasped. A single strand of black smoke leaked from it, curling upward like incense. But it didn't smell like incense. It smelled like rotted milk and warm blood. The monk began to chant softly, a guttural, ancient cadence that scratched at her ears and made the insects fall silent around them. The smoke turned into a face, briefly, a hollow-eyed grin, lips chewed off, a tongue split down the middle. Then it vanished. The tooth cracked down the center, but it didn't break. Instead, it grew a faint vein of red, like a capillary, snaking through the ceramic. "It's hungry," he said. "It needs a mouth to rest in, a host that smiles." Suda stared at it, heart pounding. "How do you stop it?" The monk didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, whispered, "You don't. You only keep it moving before it plants itself too deep to pull." She felt something cold in her gums then, a pressure, like a new tooth growing. But she hadn't had dental work done in years. That night, she woke with a torn piece of gauze in her mouth and blood beneath her nails. They said the fire consumed everything in under an hour. Wat Nakhon had stood for nearly a century, a modest temple hidden in the old heart of Bangkok, long before condos and car parks rose around it. But one rainy season, 7 years ago, it caught fire in the middle of the night. No lightning, no candles, no explanation. Just flames, red, thick, and fast, leaping from roof to relic like they'd been waiting to be fed. Only one body was found in the ashes. He hadn't tried to run. He had sat, cross-legged, in the center of the chanting hall, teeth clenched, hands folded, burned clean through, except for his skull, which was left strangely intact, blackened but unbroken. The villagers whispered afterward that he had invited the fire, that he'd asked it to come. His name was Pra Narung, a scholar monk, once praised for his meditations on pain and silence. But in his later years, he became obsessed with the unseen, not ghosts, but the echoes of ghosts. Lingering anguish, he called it. Not the spirit of a dead person, but the leftover suffering that attaches to the body part left behind, a bone, a tooth, a fragment of nail. He believed those pieces still felt, still hungered, and if he could trap that hunger, control it, he could use it to help others. He began experimenting in secret, mixing cremation ash with clay, inscribing ancient scripts into false teeth, calling forth sorrow from the bones of the dead and offering them a place to rest, in the mouth of the living. He called the process Pope Yim, the smiling host. But something went wrong. One novice monk reportedly found a prototype, a tooth inscribed with blood. He inserted it into a monkey's jaw. The monkey died 3 days later, except it didn't stop moving. It smiled in its sleep. It screamed whenever someone tried to remove the tooth. The novice fled. Days later, his body was found at the temple gate, jaws shattered, mouth stuffed with his own molars, cracked and bloody. No one reported it officially. No one wanted the temple closed, until the fire. Suda read all of this in a yellow dossier handed to her by an old retired city inspector who had investigated the temple post-fire. Of course they covered it up, he muttered bitterly. No one wants to admit a monk summoned a curse through dental surgery. But his skull, Suda asked. What happened to it? The inspector went quiet, then said, "It went missing before we arrived. We think someone took it." Who would steal a cursed monk's skull? He looked her dead in the eyes. Someone who wanted his work to continue. Suda's fingers trembled as she flipped through the last photo in the dossier. Charred but clear, the skull sat on an altar of broken ceramic teeth, and behind it, barely visible in the shadows, a man in surgical scrubs stood watching. His face burned into the corner of the frame, expressionless, except for the smile. She returned home and opened the drawer where she kept the remaining implant. It was gone. In its place sat a new one, still warm, still wet, and on its surface, carved with microscopic precision, was a single Thai word: smile. It started with a twitch, not a full movement, just a slight, involuntary pull at the corner of her lips. Suda caught it in the mirror while brushing her teeth. Her hand froze mid-motion as her mouth curled, not wide, not dramatic, but unmistakably wrong. Like her face was practicing without permission. She blinked. The smile vanished. Her reflection stared back, neutral, almost bored. Maybe she was just exhausted. Maybe her nerves were frayed from too many interviews, too many dead ends. But as she lowered the toothbrush, something red dripped into the sink. She hadn't bitten her lip. She leaned closer, and then she saw it. A thin line of blood leaking from behind her left molar. The gum was swollen, taut. She pressed her tongue against it and felt something hard, too new. Something was growing inside her, something that hadn't asked to be there. She spent the next hour standing in front of the mirror, refusing to blink. The apartment was silent. No TV, no fan. Even the refrigerator had gone unnaturally quiet. All she could hear was her own breath and the soft, wet click of her jaw shifting every few seconds. She spoke aloud, just to check. "Hello?" Her voice came out normal. Then she whispered, "Is it you?" Her lips didn't move, but her reflection did. Only for a second. A flash. But it was enough. Her own mirrored image smiled back, not with her eyes, not with her muscles, just with the teeth. She stumbled backward, knocking over her makeup tray. Something rolled across the floor and hit the wall. It was the implant, the new one. She hadn't touched it, hadn't even taken it out of the drawer since last night. And yet here it was, cold and heavy in her hand. There were tiny scratch marks on its surface now, faint, almost invisible. She held it under a flashlight. It wasn't scratches, it was engraving. Teeth, hundreds of them, microscopic, carved in the ceramic like a colony, all smiling, all facing inward, like they were waiting to be surrounded by flesh. She dropped it. It didn't bounce. It clung to the floor like something wet and alive. Panicked, Suda ran to the bathroom again, flicked on the lights, and opened her mouth wide, and screamed. Not because of pain, but because of absence. One of her own teeth was gone, lower right canine, a blank space now. No bleeding, no gum tear, just smooth emptiness. Her eyes widened. In the mirror, her reflection began to smile again. But she wasn't smiling. Her mouth was open, trembling, yet the reflection curled its lips. Teeth bared, cheeks hollowed. It whispered something, not into her ears, but directly into her skull. A voice with the sound of bone grinding on porcelain. "You invited me." She slammed the mirror with her fist. Glass shattered, blood spilled, and for a split second, caught in the broken fragments, she saw a different face. Her own, but aged, eyed hollowed, gums torn, mouth full of nothing but the same tooth, repeated over and over, crowding her jaw like a grotesque army. All of them smiling. She collapsed to the floor, clutching her jaw, sobbing silently. And behind her, in the darkness of the hallway, a single sound echoed. Gnock, gnock, gnock. Chewing from somewhere inside the walls. The envelope came in the mail without a stamp. No return address, no handwriting. Just a plain, cream-colored envelope slipped under Suda's door sometime in the night. Inside was a single USB drive, unmarked, old, slightly scorched at the edge. It smelled faintly of incense and antiseptic. She plugged it into her laptop. A folder popped up. White Nirvana, internal records, do not duplicate. Her heart pounded. Inside were 8 video files, all labeled the same way, TS01 through TS08, each no longer than 2 minutes, each silent, each showing the same small operating room, the same dental chair, the same surgical lights. The faces were different men and women, most of them young, all unconscious, all going through the same procedure. In each one, the dentist, Dr. Atisak, inserted 3 ceramic teeth, but in every case, just before the video ended, he added a 4th. Not from the tray, from a small wooden box carved with ancient Thai inscriptions and sealed with red wax. The 4th tooth was always darker, always slower to implant, and every time the patient twitched when it was inserted, eyes fluttering, jaw locking for a moment, then still. There was a 9th file, buried deeper, hidden under a corrupted subfolder. TS09 priority. No timestamp, no metadata, just one video. Suda hesitated, then clicked. The screen lit up. This patient wasn't unconscious. She was awake, strapped to the chair, trembling, panic in her eyes, begging, mouth already open, gag in place. It was Pin Chanak. Her hands were shaking against the restraints, her eyes darting wildly as Dr. Atisak calmly reached for the 4th implant. He held it up to the camera. This one was different. It pulsed, almost as if it were breathing. There was a hairline crack down its center, but inside the crack, something moved, like a vein, like an eye. Pin Chanak screamed, muffled. The video distorted briefly, then snapped back. The dentist whispered something into her ear before placing the tooth into her mouth. There was no surgical motion, no drill, no force. The tooth simply sank into her gum line, as if drawn by hunger. Pin Chanak went stiff, then began to smile, not gradually, instantly, like a mask sliding into place, and then she spoke. But it wasn't her voice. It was 2 voices layered together, hers and something older, deeper, warped like stone cracking underwater. I have found her. This one fits. The screen flickered, then went black. Suda sat frozen. The room around her felt smaller, tighter. Her own jaw ached with pressure. She reached into her mouth, fingertips trembling, and touched the gum behind her last molar. It was bulging, swollen, moving. She grabbed her phone and dialed Crit. Her voice came out cracked and frantic. Crit, I need a scan, right now. Of what? My teeth. A pause. Crit? I think something is growing inside me. 30 minutes later, she was in his lab, clenching down on the X-ray plate, trying not to scream. The machine whirred, lights blinked, the scan printed. Crit picked it up. His eyes widened. Then he turned the image toward her. There, nestled deep behind her lower molars, was a new shape. Too long to be a normal tooth, too curved, too thin. It looked like a finger. White Nirvana Dental looked abandoned. Its gleaming white lights were off. The glass doors were shuttered. The smiling receptionist, Mint, was nowhere to be seen. But Suda knew it was still alive. She felt it. In her jaw, in her bones, in the growing weight of something foreign nesting beneath her gum line. She hadn't told Crit the full truth, not yet. But time was running out, and the pain was becoming unbearable. The pressure in her mouth pulsed like a second heartbeat. She needed answers, so she returned to the clinic. This time, she didn't knock. She picked the lock with the help of a hairpin and a borrowed tension wrench. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the cold hit her like a wall. Not air-conditioned cold, cemetery cold. The interior was pristine, too pristine. No dust, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever left or entered, except for one thing. The lights in room 3 were still on. That was the room from the videos, the room where Mintra had streamed her surgery. The same curved dental chair, the same humming overhead lamp, and the same long mirror on the back wall, half fogged, as if someone had just breathed on it. Suda stepped in slowly, camera rolling from her chest harness. Everything was silent until she heard it. Drip, drip, drip. It was coming from the sink. She turned. The chrome faucet gleamed. A single drop fell into the white basin, and another, then another. She moved closer and saw the stain, dark red. It wasn't rust. It wasn't water. It was blood. She reached out hesitantly and turned the handle. At first, nothing. Then, with a sudden gasp of pipes, a gush of thick, warm liquid burst from the faucet. Suda screamed and stumbled back as the sink overflowed with blood, not fresh and bright, but old and congealed, dark as liver, clinging to the porcelain in ropes. The mirror above her began to steam. Words appeared, as if written by an unseen finger from the other side. Let it smile. And then, in a blink, the reflection changed. It wasn't her. It was Mintra, naked from the shoulders up, face pale, eyes wide, jaw slack, and then smiling. But not with joy, with agony, teeth bloodied, gums torn, her lips stretched too far, almost ripping at the edges. And behind her, something moved in the mirror. Something thin, crouched, grinning. Suda turned around. Nothing. She turned back to the mirror. It was normal again. Just her face. But the sink was still overflowing, the blood now pouring onto the floor. She reached to turn the faucet off, but the handle snapped off in her hand. Then she saw it, lodged in the drain. A tooth. Too long, too curved, still pulsing. She ran, through the empty hall, down the corridor past room 1, room 2. She passed a closed door with a golden plaque, operating room, restricted access. As she slowed to catch her breath, she felt it again, the pulse in her mouth. She dropped to her knees, gagging, pulled a small makeup mirror from her bag, opened her mouth wide, and watched in real time as something white pushed through her gum from the inside. No surgery, no tools, just skin parting, bloodless, a fourth tooth emerging between her back molars like a parasite laying claim. Her body didn't resist. It welcomed it. And then she smiled. Not because she wanted to, because something inside her did. Suda hadn't slept in 2 days. Her apartment, once a cluttered sanctuary of coffee cups and notebooks, now felt like a cage. Every corner creaked, every pipe throbbed, every mirror was covered in cloth. She had taped black towels over them all, bathroom, bedroom, even her laptop webcam after what she saw in the clinic. She didn't trust reflections anymore. She didn't trust her own face, especially when it smiled on its own. The bleeding from her gums had stopped, but something worse had taken its place. A constant, wet chewing sound, not from her mouth, from the walls. It began softly, a tick, 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 like a rodent scuttling inside drywall. But it grew. Night after night, the sound got louder, thicker. Now it was unmistakable, gnawing, gnawing with purpose, not like an animal, like something trying to get out, or worse, trying to build. At 2:44 a.m., she sat in bed, knees pulled to her chest, flashlight aimed at the far wall. The sound was directly behind the headboard. No, no. She pressed her ear against the plaster and heard it clearly, chewing and breathing, slow, hungry. She ran her fingers along the wall, then froze. There, near the bottom corner, was a faint bump, a bulge forming beneath the paint. She fetched a butter knife from the kitchen, knelt beside the wall, and began scraping gently. The white layer peeled away. Beneath it, plaster dust. Beneath the plaster, wood. Beneath the wood, she gasped. Teeth. Dozens of them, growing out of the wall. Not glued, not embedded. Growing, gums and all. She stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Light spilled across the room, and the teeth twitched, just for a second, like they had noticed her. She called Crit. No answer. She called again, again. On the fourth try, he picked up, groggy. Suda, it's 3 a.m. What the... Teeth, she whispered, voice cracking. They're in my walls. They're in my fucking walls. What? I think it's spreading. I don't think it's just me. I think it's looking for more mouths. There was silence. Then Crit said something that made her stomach drop. Suda, are you near your bathroom? She turned. The door was cracked open. She hadn't been in there since covering the mirror. She could hear the faucet dripping. Drip, drip, drip. But it wasn't water this time. It was wet chewing and laughter, small, childlike, but hollow. She pushed the door open. The mirror was covered, but the sink wasn't. It was filled with teeth. Loose, wet, twitching, like maggots in a bowl, all grinding gently, all smiling. She backed out and slammed the door. Behind it, the chewing grew louder, from the ceiling, from the floor, from inside her. She dropped to her knees and began vomiting. Not food, not bile, just red thread, wet, spongy strands like sinew. She reached into her mouth, gagging, and pulled out a single baby tooth, still bleeding at the root. Not hers. She never had baby teeth like that. She held it in her hand, and it began to pulse, like a heartbeat, like it was calling the others. On the wall above her couch, a crack began to form, a faint smile, widening. Suda locked herself in the kitchen. It was the only room left untouched. No sink, no mirrors, no vents in the walls. She sat curled beneath the table, a butcher knife in one hand and the baby tooth in the other. It had stopped pulsing, but it was still warm. She placed it on the tile and it didn't roll. It rooted, just sat there like it had found a patch of flesh and waited. She wanted to run, she wanted to scream, she wanted someone, anyone, to tell her she wasn't losing her mind. But she wasn't delusional. This was real. She had proof, she had footage, she had blood. She had a fourth tooth growing in her mouth, and tonight it spoke. At exactly 3:33 a.m., she blacked out. One moment she was staring at the crack beneath the kitchen door. The next, she was standing in front of her bathroom mirror, naked, smiling. Both her hands were covered in blood, and her jaw hurt. She didn't remember walking there, didn't remember picking up the toothbrush, but it was lodged in her throat, bent backward, as if she had tried to scrub something off her tongue from the inside. She yanked it out and collapsed to the floor, gasping. Her mouth was bleeding again. A low hum filled the room, then a voice, hers, but deeper, guttural, from her own chest. "You fit. You don't fight. You let me in." She screamed, but no sound came out, only a smile, a perfect, grotesque curve. The next morning, she received an email. No subject, no sender, just a video file titled, "Welcome, Host 10. She clicked play. It was grainy, security camera footage, inside the operating room at White Nirvana. The angle was overhead, and in the chair, strapped down, was her. She didn't remember this, didn't remember the lights, the hum, the plastic taste of latex gloves pressing her tongue down. But the video said otherwise. She watched, horrified, as Dr. Athisak leaned over her face, holding the fourth tooth. Except this time, it wasn't a tooth. It was a shard of skull, filed down, inscribed. It still had a suture line running across it like a sealed eye. He placed it in her mouth, not into the gum, into the roof, piercing upward into the space between flesh and soul. And then she smiled, in the footage, just like she was smiling now. She ran to the sink, desperate to tear it out, but when she opened her mouth and looked inside, she saw nothing. No wound, no tooth, just her own reflection, staring back with the same grin as always. But in her eyes, something was different, something behind them, watching, settling in. That night, she dreamed she was walking through Bangkok, but the city was wrong. It was too quiet. Everyone she passed turned to look at her and smiled. Identical. Mouths open too wide, gums too red, and behind their lips, all of them had the same fourth tooth. She tried to scream, but in the dream, she had no tongue, only more teeth. When she woke, her hands were shaking, her fingernails were bloody. She found bite marks on her pillow, and a message on the bathroom mirror carved directly into the glass. Host found. Transmission begins. The elevator wasn't on any clinic map. Suda only found it because her blood dripped onto the floor. She'd returned to White Nirvana under cover of darkness, dressed in black, hood pulled low. Her camera was strapped to her chest. Her jaw ached. Her gums throbbed. She didn't care. She was done running. She wanted to see the root. She wanted to look it in the face. And that's when the drop of blood, thick, dark, and sticky, slipped from the corner of her lip and hit the tile. It didn't splatter. It sank, like ink into thirsty paper, and the floor clicked. A small square of tile retracted, revealing a hidden button beneath the front desk, invisible unless you bled on it. The moment she pressed it, a panel in the wall slid open. Behind it, a chrome elevator, unmarked, silent. She stepped in and descended. The doors opened into a hallway unlike anything she'd seen upstairs. No more white walls, no fake smiles, only stone, ancient, scorched, cracked. The air was heavy with incense and something deeper, like iron and bone dust. Dim red lights flickered overhead, spaced unevenly like dying candles. At the end of the corridor, she found a massive set of black doors. Wood, but breathing. The grain pulsed subtly, like veins. At the center, carved deep into the panels, was a mouth. Not a symbol of one, an actual mouth. Lips stretched, gums exposed, teeth filed to points. She reached out. The door opened on its own. Inside, she found the ritual room, and it was worse than anything she had imagined. The floor was bone, not tiles, not cement, bone. Human jawbones stitched together, row after row, molars still attached, some with gold caps, some cracked in half. The walls were lined with surgical chairs, old, rusted, stained, each one occupied, each one grinning. Bodies, some mummified, some fresh, all smiling, all silent. Teeth removed, except for one. One implant, dead center in each jaw. The fourth tooth. At the far end of the altar stood the skull, not Buddhist, older. It resembled a furnace, a charred pit surrounded by symbols etched in ash. Above it hung a wind chime made entirely of baby teeth, clicking gently in the dead air. And in the center of the altar, the skull, burned black, still intact. The crown was carved with thousands of tiny letters, ancient Thai script so dense it pulsed like circuitry. The sutures were sealed with ceramic. The smile had been split in half, with extra teeth jammed in. It was grotesque and alive, because when Suda stepped forward, the jaw moved. Click, click, and then, welcome back, vessel. The voice came not from the skull, but from inside her mouth. She dropped to her knees, her tongue seized, her teeth locked, the fourth tooth inside her burned. She screamed through clenched jaws as her body arched backward, the pain blooming like fire up her spine. Around her, the corpses in the chairs began to shift, just slightly, enough to smile wider. The skull laughed. "You opened the door. Now you'll hold the key." When she could breathe again, Suda crawled to the altar. Behind the skull, she found a notebook, handwritten in what looked like blood. She flipped through the pages. Blueprints, ceramic formulas, ceremonial diagrams, and a final note scrawled in jagged Thai. One smile to contain pain. One host to wear it. One tooth to spread it. Beneath the note, a mirror, framed in bone. She looked, and the reflection was no longer hers. It wore her face, but its eyes were hollow. Its jaw was filled, not with 32 teeth, but with one, repeated, over and over and over. The notebook shook in her hands. Suda sat cross-legged on the bone floor beneath the altar of teeth, surrounded by silent corpses and whispering walls. The deeper she read, the more the room seemed to breathe with her, or rather, around her. She turned another page. A list, typed on brittle yellowed paper and stapled inside the notebook. At the top, candidates for 4th implant ceremony, high visibility hosts only. Beneath it, a series of names: Mintra, Pim Chamak, 3 other influencers she recognized, all missing. And at the very bottom, her own name, Sudha Kanchanaburi. Her hands trembled. Next to her name was a handwritten note in red ink: emotionally fractured, susceptible, self-isolated, good anchor for transmission. Implant accepted, spirit showing signs of bonding. Sudha dropped the notebook. It hit the floor with a wet sound. She backed away, right into the base of one of the surgical chairs. The corpse in the chair lurched forward. Its jaw dropped open. A 4th tooth, longer than the rest, slid out and landed on the floor between her knees. Still warm, still twitching. She scrambled to her feet, choking on panic. And then she saw it, the ceramic tray on the far wall, sterile, polished, laid out with surgical tools and 4 tiny black boxes, each box labeled with a number. She opened the one labeled number 10. Inside was a tooth, just one, glowing faintly under the room's red light. Unlike the others, this one wasn't smooth. It had roots, veined, alive, and inscribed on its surface a mouth with hundreds of other mouths inside it, forming an infinite spiral of smiling faces. Beneath the box was a folded form, a consent sheet, signed by her. She hadn't signed anything, and yet the signature matched. Her handwriting, her ID number, her photo. Stamped in official red ink, implant completed, integration in progress. Sudha stumbled back, dizzy. She could feel it now. The 4th tooth wasn't growing inside her anymore. It was already there. It had been there for days, and now it was replicating. She grabbed a flashlight and opened her mouth wide in front of the mirror. Behind her molars, in the softest part of her gum, she saw the truth. Another tooth forming, not erupting, budding. She pressed a finger against it and felt the gum part like soft clay. No pain, only heat. The tooth moved toward her touch, like a child pressing against the belly from the inside. She screamed, but her reflection didn't. Her reflection only smiled. She grabbed a scalpel from the tray and brought it to her mouth. She had to get it out, now, before it went further, before it reached the nerves, before it connected. But the moment the blade touched her gum, her hand froze, her fingers clenched, not by her will, and then she smiled. Not a twitch, not a curl, a full, radiant, peaceful grin. Her lips cracked from the pressure. Blood streamed down her chin, and from inside her skull, the voice returned. Not a whisper this time. A whisper would have been kind. This was a chant, low, ancient, shaking her bones. The smile cannot be removed. The smile is the root. The root is the gate. The gate has opened. Behind her, the walls of the ritual room began to split. Teeth pushed through, rows of them, some still dripping blood, some gnawed down to the pulp. And in the far back corner, a dark shape began to crawl out of the wall. Thin, skeletal, wearing robes of ash. Its face was a cracked skull, missing all but one perfect tooth, the 4th, the original. And it was coming, not to kill her, not to haunt her, but to complete her. The scalpel trembled in her grip. Suda stood before the altar, soaked in sweat and shadow, her jaw pulsing like something alive had rooted itself beneath the skin, which it had. She could feel the tooth now, not as an object, but as a presence. It wasn't just occupying space, it was making decisions. She raised the blade again. Her reflection, what was once her reflection, watched from the dark mirror behind the altar. It smiled wider than her face ever could, teeth splitting at the cheeks like wet paper. "Do it," the reflection mouthed silently. Her real mouth moved too, in sync, but she didn't tell it to. She screamed and stabbed. The metal sliced into her lower gum. There was no pain, only pressure. She dug in, jaw trembling, blood pouring into her throat. It tasted like old rust and something else, something sweet, like syrup thickened in a funeral bowl. She reached in with her fingers, slipping beneath the edge of her molar, and she felt it, the fourth tooth, wriggling, like a fish trapped in skin. She gripped it, pulled. It didn't want to come. Her nerves caught fire, her vision blurred. She yanked harder, choking on screams and blood and the distant sound of chanting, not around her, but inside her skull. Then, pop! It came loose. The moment it left her mouth, the world tilted sideways. She collapsed to the floor, body twitching, breath ragged. She held the tooth in her bloodied palm. It pulsed once, twice, then began to split. Thin cracks opened across its surface, hairline fractures revealing something organic beneath the ceramic shell, like marrow, twitching and coiled. And from its tip, a whisper. Not a sound, but a thought. "You're too late." Suda's eyes widened. She reached into her mouth again, panicked. Another bump. Behind the upper molar now, smaller, smoother. Another fourth tooth, already growing. The one she pulled wasn't the only one. It had replicated. She looked around the ritual room. Every corpse in every chair was now facing her, their mouths open, their fourth teeth twitching in unison, grinning, like a congregation welcoming a new priestess. The mirror behind her cracked. The reflection inside stepped out. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't her. It was something mimicking her, wearing her skin like a costume, her voice like a song it had learned to sing backwards. It leaned down beside her, knelt by her trembling body and whispered, "You're too late. We don't need just one. We never needed one. The mouth is the portal, and you've opened so many." Then it smiled, and so did she, because she couldn't stop it. Even with blood pouring down her chin, even with a mouth half torn and raw, even with her soul screaming inside, she smiled, because the fourth tooth was no longer trying to live in her. It had started living as her. The body that rose from the floor was hers. The steps it took were hers. The face it wore was hers. But Suda wasn't inside anymore. Not fully. She was somewhere deeper now, floating behind her own eyes, like a passenger trapped in the back seat of her own skull. And the thing driving her? It was smiling, without permission. She walked out of the ritual room with calm, controlled grace, as if nothing had happened, as if her jaw wasn't bleeding, as if her hands weren't stained with blood and bone dust. In the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored wall stared back. The smile didn't break, even when she whispered in her own mind, "Stop, please stop." The smile widened, and her mouth, no longer hers, whispered aloud, "You stopped first." The clinic lobby was empty, but not silent. From every vent, every socket, every crack in the tile came the faint chewing, a chorus of it now, dozens, hundreds, a symphony of grinding, gnashing, gnuck, gnuck, gnuck. Somewhere beneath her tongue, she felt them. More, tiny nugs of enamel sprouting behind her molars, a full ring of new teeth forming like a crown of parasites. She knew what it meant. The fourth tooth wasn't a single cursed object. It was a seed, a design, a transmission vector. Once accepted by the host, it rewrote the body, starting from the mouth, because the mouth was the first gate, the oldest symbol, where words entered, where souls escaped, where hunger lived. She walked out into the street just before dawn. Bangkok hadn't woken up yet, but the city would soon, and she could feel the smile's anticipation. It didn't want to hide anymore. It wanted to spread. It wanted more mouths, more roots. It wanted to laugh. She passed a mirror on the side of a tuk-tuk. Her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. The image lagged, a frame behind, as if something else was trying to catch up to her shape. Something with the same face, but too many teeth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A new message. Unknown number. Transmission successful. Smile unlocked. Phase crew ready. Below it, a single attachment. A live stream thumbnail. Her face. Her name. Sudha Kanchanaburi. My smile transformation journey begins now. Scheduled to go live in 3 hours. She hadn't said it. She hadn't filmed anything, but someone or something had. Her hand moved on its own, tapping the screen, opening the preview. The video began. She sat in the same dental chair from before, wearing the same clothes, but her eyes were hollow. She spoke directly to the camera, with a warm, gentle tone. Hello, my loves. Today I want to show you something beautiful, something that changed my life. It's not just a smile, it's a truth, it's a door. She smiled. Blood ran down her gums. And once you see it, you'll never be able to close it again. The screen flickered, then glitched. For a split second, her mouth opened wider than it should have, revealing teeth. Too many, too sharp, too eager. Sudha dropped the phone. It kept playing. Her own voice echoed from the speaker. You smiled at it. Now it will smile through you. And somewhere in the back of her throat, she felt her lips curve again, uninvited. Sudha stood over the stove, hand trembling, the fourth tooth held tight in a pair of tongs. She had torn it out again, or what she thought was the last of it. Her jaw was numb now, a slick mess of blood and tissue. Her tongue stung where it had scraped against fresh enamel. There were already others. She could feel them. But this one, the one still twitching in the steel grip, had to die first. She turned the gas flame high, blue and roaring. The apartment smelled like iron and decay and something sweet, like rotting fruit left too long on a shrine. She lowered the tooth into the flame. It hissed, twitched, and then it screamed. Not audibly, but inside her skull. The room tilted, her vision darkened at the edges, her knees buckled. The voice returned, not whispering, begging. "No, you are already part of it. You carry the kiln inside you now." She dropped the tongs. The tooth bounced across the floor. Still intact, still moving. It hadn't cracked. It hadn't scorched. It had grown brighter, white-hot, glowing like bone from a funeral pyre. She tried to stomp it. Her foot froze mid-air, not from pain, but from resistance. Something inside her refused, a nerve, a tendon, a will that wasn't hers. "You think fire will purify," the voice coiled inside her ribcage. "But this fire was born from fire. I was tempered in ash. I am what remains." Suda collapsed. When she woke, the kitchen was filled with smoke, but nothing had burned. The fire had gone out. The walls were unscathed. Only the mirror, the tiny one she kept magneted to the fridge, had changed. Its surface had melted inward, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. A face, her face, with eyes hollowed out and a mouth filled entirely with fourth teeth, row after row growing backward into the throat like nesting dolls of bone. It moved and whispered, "You are the kiln now. You make them." Suda fled. No plan, no phone, just bloodied clothes and the scream still ringing in her gums. She found herself at the ruins of Wat Nakorn, the temple that had burned down years ago, the birthplace of the curse. It was dusk again. The earth there was still blackened, still hot. She knelt at the old altar stone and screamed to no one. "If fire made you," she whispered, "then let fire take you back." She grabbed a nearby can of lighter fluid from a construction pile, poured it over her face, her mouth, her jaw. She struck a match. Her hand shook violently. The fourth tooth inside her began to chatter, click, 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 vibrating with fury. The flame hovered near her lips, closer. But then her hand stopped, frozen, her fingers unclenched. The match fell, extinguished before it hit the ground. And then her own voice, twisted, layered, inhuman, whispered aloud, "We do not fear the flame. We walked out of it, and now we walk through you." She fell backward. The ground opened beneath her like a mouth, swallowing her into ash, into memory, into something older than her body could hold. And as the darkness closed in, she realized fire cannot cleanse what was forged by fire, and she had already become the next forge. She awoke buried in ash, mouth full of grit, chest coated in soot. For a moment, Suda didn't know if she was alive or dead, or something in between. The world above her was orange with dawn, but the light didn't reach the pit she'd fallen into. The smell was familiar now, burned bone, temple incense, and teeth. Too many teeth. She wasn't alone down here. She could feel them beneath the surface. Dozens of skulls, all smiling, all silent, all watching, waiting. She dug her way out with trembling fingers. Her hands bled against broken shards of pottery, of ribs, of jawbone. When she surfaced, her body felt emptied, not in the way pain empties you, but in the way a house feels after the last light goes out. The teeth inside her jaw had stopped growing, but only because they'd finished. She opened her mouth and saw them in the shard of a shattered offering bowl. 4 new molars, identical. The fourth tooth, copied, multiplied, installed. Her smile wasn't hers anymore. It was a mask, a ritual in motion. Unless she found a way to reverse it, this ritual would complete its final phase, permanent transmission, final host stabilization, global spread via mirror touch points. She remembered the scroll in the ritual room, the one beneath the altar that spoke of Puklom Sien, the forbidden rite of anchoring spirits in the mouth. But beneath it, in a margin hastily blacked out, was a single cursed line written in crimson. To undo the smile must be made real. Pull it back from clay into flesh. Feed it what it craves. It wasn't metaphor. It was instruction. A reverse ceremony. She returned to the ruins of Wat Nakhon with a single purpose: to complete the ritual and then undo it. She brought offerings, her blood, her extracted tooth, the notebook she had stolen, and the name of the one who created it all. Pra Narun, the monk who tried to trap suffering in ceramics, who burned inside his own fire, who carved mouths into death itself. She placed the offerings in a broken ceremonial bowl and began to chant. The words weren't hers. They came from somewhere behind her jaw, old syllables buried in the marrow of the cursed tooth. She bit her tongue to drown them out, spat blood into the offering. The air thickened, the shadows deepened. Then the skull rose. Half buried in soot, the burnt skull of Pra Narun surfaced like a whale from black ocean. Its jaw clicked once, twice, then opened. She could see the sockets were empty, yet still watching. She placed her extracted fourth tooth into its mouth. It hissed. The earth shook. All around her, the dead began to grin. Not just bones, but shadows, reflections. Her reflection. It emerged from the shattered mirror shard beside the altar, stepping into her shape, teeth already grown. "You can't undo me," it said, voice sticky and wet. "You're only here because I let you be." Suda raised the ceremonial knife. "I'm not here to undo you. I'm here to cut you out." And with one brutal motion, she drove the blade into her own mouth, straight through the gum, shattering one of the fourth teeth. Crack! She screamed. Blood flooded her throat. Her body seized. She felt the bond tear, like tendons snapping in the soul. The reflection gasped. The smile broke. And for a moment it all went still. No more voices. No more chewing. Only breath. Only silence. Suda collapsed beside the altar, gasping, jaw broken, mouth ruined. But the smile was gone. She couldn't move her lips. She couldn't even speak. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't smiling. And the skull of Pra Narun, it had crumbled to ash. Was it over? She didn't know. But she had done what they never dared. She had smiled back at the curse and torn it from her own mouth. And as dawn broke across the soot-covered ruins, Suda passed out to the sound of her own heartbeat. Slow, steady, alone. The hospital room was too bright, too clean, too quiet. Suda blinked against the fluorescent lights above her. Her jaw was bandaged tight, her throat raw, her limbs weak. A nurse moved silently across the room, checking machines without looking at her. The police had found her unconscious at the ruins of Wat Nakhon, alone, barely breathing, mouth torn open and bleeding. They assumed it was a failed suicide. She hadn't spoken since. Couldn't. Her jaw had been wired shut after the self-inflicted trauma. Her voice silenced. Her body stitched back together. But her mind was still screaming. Not from pain, from the quiet. Because in that quiet, she realized something was wrong. Too wrong. On the third night, she began hearing the chewing again, faint, inside the walls, inside the vents, inside the mirror. Her reflection didn't match anymore. It was subtle at first, a blink delayed by half a second, a smile forming when she wasn't smiling. But then, during a routine checkup, she caught it. The reflection had 4 canines, not 3. Her teeth hadn't grown back, the doctor said so, but the mirror? The mirror showed a different truth. The mirror showed what she was becoming. Later that night, the hospital lights flickered. Sudha sat up in her bed, wires trailing from her arms. And across the room, her reflection stepped out of the mirror. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, a body, an exact copy, but smiling, always smiling. It walked toward her, calm, patient, like it had waited for this moment. She tried to scream, but the wires in her jaw held tight. The thing leaned in, its mouth close to her ear, and whispered, "You broke the tooth, not the kiln, and I'm still warm." When the nurses arrived in the morning, Sudha was sitting upright, alert, still. Her jaw was no longer wired, yet perfectly closed, too perfectly. Her lips curled in a serene expression, and her chart, which had marked her unresponsive for 3 days, now included a new note. Patient smiled during the night. Unexplained facial recovery. Jaw fully restored, awaiting psych evaluation. They didn't notice the small drop of blood on her pillow, or the new X-ray posted outside her room, which clearly showed a 4th molar reforming. The live stream began later that day, automatically posted to her channel. She hadn't touched her phone, hadn't spoken, yet somehow the camera was rolling, and she was already smiling. The caption read, "Healing update. You won't believe what grew back." In the last 3 seconds of the video, the smile widened, the screen glitched, and a single whisper came through the speakers. "We only needed one to smile last." The video hit 1 million views in 4 hours. Sudha didn't promote it, didn't speak in it, didn't need to. Just her face, just her smile, wide, serene, disturbingly perfect. The caption was vague. "Something changed. I want to show you." Viewers clicked out of curiosity, then stayed, longer than they meant to, because the longer they watched, the more wrong her expression became. Teeth too aligned, eyes too calm, and behind her, barely visible in the blurry background, a shadowed figure standing still in the mirror, grinning. Some thought it was an editing trick, others said it was AI, but the symptoms began anyway. In Tokyo, a teenage boy live-streamed his reaction to the video. 3 minutes in, he froze. Then he smiled. Didn't blink for 12 minutes. Later that night, he was found sleepwalking, face covered in blood, gum line swollen, with a new molar pushing out sideways from beneath his tongue. In Seoul, a dental influencer shared a slowed-down analysis of the clip. She paused at second 0333. Her nose started bleeding. She passed out live on stream. When she woke, her voice was gone, replaced with a whisper that didn't sound like her. In Manila, a makeup artist noticed something stranger. When she applied lipstick after watching the clip, her reflection smiled before she did. Then her bathroom mirror cracked, just once, a clean, thin curve. like a grin carved into the glass. The hashtag fourth tooth began trending globally, but it wasn't just online. Dentists across Asia began reporting cases of a new type of growth, non-cancerous, ceramic-like, tooth-like, rootless but alive, always appearing in the same place, behind the last molar, exactly where the fourth tooth was placed. Even people who had never had dental surgery were now growing new teeth, smiling more often, uncontrollably. And at the center of it all, Sudha. She didn't post again. She didn't need to. The one video kept looping, spreading. It showed up on autoplay lists. It hijacked dental ads. People swore they'd never clicked on it, yet it found them anyway. And once they watched it all the way through, they began to dream about ash, about bone, about mirrors that smiled back, and most of all, about the tooth. Crit, a mortuary tech, tried to warn the authorities. He showed them the scans, the replication patterns, the skulls that had gone missing from cremation vaults. But by then, it was too late. Even the investigators were smiling, and behind closed doors, one by one, they began to chew. Some say Sudha was possessed. Others say she died during the ritual, and what returned was wearing her skin. No one knows for sure, because the final piece of footage didn't come from her camera. It came from a dental office security feed in Chiang Rai, a new clinic, sleek, white, unlicensed. Its name? White Nirvana, Branch 2. In the last recorded clip, before the feed was wiped, a patient sits in the chair, ready for implants. Dr. Atisak leans into frame, alive, smiling. Behind his mask, his jaw twitches. He holds up a tray. On it, 3 ceramic teeth, and a fourth one, a little longer, still wet, still moving. He whispers to the patient, voice barely audible, "Don't worry, this one was made just for you." The screen goes black, and the chewing begins again.